In 1900, there were about 5,000 Amish in America. Today, there are nearly 400,000. They have doubled every 20 years for over a century. By the year 2100, demographers project more than 1 million of them. The Pilgrims are gone. The Shakers are extinct. The Puritans dissolved into something unrecognizable. 3 centuries of American religious movements rose, splintered, and vanished. And one group that refuses to drive cars quietly outbred all of them. The Amish are not a museum exhibit. They are the most successful long-term survival system in North American history. And the reason has almost nothing to do with horses, hats, or hymns. Look at the religious landscape of colonial America. The Puritans of Massachusetts Bay built a city on a hill. By 1700, they were already dissolving into the broader Protestant world. Today, Puritan is a slur, not a denomination. The Shakers, who at their peak in 1840 had thousands of members and built some of the most beautiful architecture in early America, are functionally extinct. As of 2025, 2 Shakers remain. They live in a single village in Maine called Sabbath Day Lake. When they die, that is the end of 3 centuries of Shaker civilization. The Quakers shaped Pennsylvania, founded universities, ran the abolitionist movement. Their numbers in the United States have been falling for over a century. The Hutterites are smaller and growing slower. The Mennonites are bigger but assimilating faster. The Christian communes of the 1800s, the utopian colonies, the religious experiments of upstate New York and the Ohio frontier, all swallowed by time. And then there are the empires. The British Empire claimed the territory. Gone. The Confederacy claimed the South. Gone. Standard Oil ran the country, broken into pieces. The railroad barons, the steel barons, the auto kings of Detroit, the textile lords of New England. Their factories are foreclosed on, their towns are hollowed out, their fortunes scattered into trust funds and museums. Through every single one of those collapses, one group of farmers in Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Indiana kept getting bigger. The question is how? The answer starts 500 years ago, not in a barn, in a basement, Zurich, Switzerland, January 1525. A small group of religious radicals decided that infant baptism, the rite that bound newborns to the official state church, was meaningless. Baptism should be a choice made by an adult who understood what they were doing. They started baptizing each other in secret. The state called them Anabaptists, which meant rebaptizers. It was meant as an insult and a legal charge. Within a year, the Zurich City Council made rebaptism punishable by death. What happened next is one of the most violent religious crackdowns in European history. The authorities drowned them in rivers as a cruel parody of their own ritual. They burned them at the stake. They beheaded them in town squares. Historians estimate that around 2,500 Anabaptists were executed across Europe in the 1500s alone, with thousands more imprisoned, exiled, or tortured. The survivors did something that would define the next 500 years. They scattered. They hid in mountain valleys, in remote farms, in basements and barns. They learned to live without the state, without official churches, and without trust in any outside institution. They did not just refuse to participate in worldly power, they built a parallel system of their own, in secret, on the margins of every European country that wanted them dead. When you persecute a movement that hard for that long, only the most disciplined survive. Everyone else gives up. Everyone else assimilates. The ones who are left are the hardest, most committed, most communal version of the original idea. That genetic line of survivors becomes the Amish. In 1693, a Swiss elder named Jacob Amann did something almost nobody else thought to do. He made the system harder. The Anabaptists in Switzerland and the Alsace region of France had been surviving for nearly 2 centuries by quietly going along. They had relaxed some of the early rules. Communion was held once a year. The practice of shunning excommunicated members had become symbolic. The community was holding together, but the edges were getting soft. Aman argued that softness was death. He insisted on communion twice a year, the ritual washing of feet, plain dress, no trimmed beards, and most importantly, strict social shunning of anyone who broke the rules. If you left the church or were excommunicated, your own family was forbidden to eat at the same table as you. Your spouse could not share a bed with you. You were dead to the community while still alive. This was not popular. The Swiss Anabaptist leader Hans Reist refused. So Aman excommunicated him and walked out with his followers. They were now their own group, eventually called the Amish. To outside observers, this split looked self-destructive. Aman was making the rules harsher at exactly the moment when the broader European world was moving toward more tolerance. The Enlightenment was on the horizon. Religious dissent was becoming legal. Why on earth would you bind your community to stricter rules at the exact moment the cage was opening? Because Aman understood something most people miss. A movement that survives by being lenient survives by accident. A movement that survives by being demanding survives by design. He had just built the firewall. By the 1730s, the Amish were running out of safe places in Europe. Switzerland was still hostile. The Alsace expelled them in 1712. Persecution flared, then receded, then flared again. They needed a place where the system would be left alone. William Penn, the Quaker founder of Pennsylvania, had built that place. His colony was advertised across Europe as a refuge for persecuted religious minorities, with cheap land and almost no state interference in private faith. The first major group of Amish arrived in Pennsylvania in October 1737, sailing on a ship called the Charming Nancy. By the late 1800s, virtually no Amish remained in Europe. The transplant was complete. What is interesting about this migration is what they brought and what they did not bring. They brought the German dialect their descendants still speak, which Americans now call Pennsylvania Dutch. They brought the Ordnung, the unwritten community rulebook that governs every aspect of daily life. They brought the practice of mutual aid, where a single member's catastrophe becomes the entire church's responsibility. They did not bring missionaries. They did not bring marketing. They did not bring any plan to convert outsiders. Their entire growth strategy for the next 3 centuries would be the same one their ancestors had used in Swiss mountain valleys. Have many children, keep most of them, live in tight, dense, walkable communities where everybody knows everybody. Build the next generation of believers from inside, not outside. And here is where the story gets strange, because the system worked, but it almost died anyway. Before we get to that, if you are finding this interesting, hit the subscribe button. We publish a new history video every couple of weeks, and we go deep on the parts of American history that other channels skip. Your subscription is what keeps us going. Okay, so how did the most disciplined survivors of the most violent religious purge in European history come within a hair of disappearing in Middle America? By 1850, Amish families in Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Indiana were doing fine. They had farms, they had children, they had communities. They had been in America for over a century, and they had grown to roughly 20,000 people. Then they almost lost everything. The late 1800s in America were a brutal time to be a small religious community. The country was industrializing. Cities were exploding. Railroads were everywhere. Telephones were arriving. Electricity was lighting up entire towns. The Second Industrial Revolution was rolling over the countryside like a flood, and every Amish community had to decide what to do about it. A majority decided to adapt. They allowed telephones, they allowed electricity, they allowed cars and tractors and modern dress. They became the Amish Mennonites, or the Beachy Amish, or other progressive offshoots. Within a generation, most of them had assimilated into the broader American Protestant world. The historians have done the math. By 1900, of the tens of thousands of Amish who had been in America 50 years earlier, only about 5,000 remained in the old order. The rest had drifted into the mainstream. 2/3 of the population had decided that the old rules were not worth it. If you had visited a 1900 Amish settlement in Lancaster County, you would have seen a community that looked like it was on its last legs. Their young people were leaving, their numbers were shrinking, the American century was arriving, and they appeared to be on the wrong side of it. Every observer at the time would have told you the Amish were a historical curiosity that would be gone in another 2 or 3 generations. Like the Shakers, like the Hutterites, like every other religious holdout that gets outcompeted by modernity. They were wrong. And the reason they were wrong is the most important fact in this entire story. The 5,000 who remained were not just the leftovers, they were the hardest core, the ones with the strongest commitment, the densest community ties, and the highest birth rates. The Amish equivalent of a mountain spring at its narrowest point, just before it widens out again. And widen out it did. From 1900 to 1950, the Old Order Amish doubled. From 1950 to 1970, they doubled again. From 1970 to 1990, again. Every 20 years, like clockwork, the population doubled. How? 2 things, both simple. First, family size. The average Amish woman has between 6 and 7 children. Some communities run higher, closer to 9. For comparison, the average American woman today has about 1.5 children. An Amish family puts roughly 4 times more children into the next generation than a typical American family. That alone, compounded across a century, creates an avalanche. Second, retention. In the 1930s, the percentage of Amish children who chose to be baptized into the church as adults was somewhere in the 70s. By 2000, it was around 90%. Today, the most traditional groups, like the Andy Weaver Amish in Ohio, have retention rates as high as 97%. The system has gotten better, not worse, at keeping its own people. The result is a curve that goes vertical. From 5,000 in 1900, the Amish climbed to around 43,000 by 1970, then to 177,000 by 2000, then to over 410,000 in 2025. They are now in 32 American states, 3 Canadian provinces, and a small settlement in Bolivia. There were 9 new settlements just last year, and not a single one folded. While the rest of America was getting an iPhone, the Amish were quietly building the most successful demographic engine on the continent. There is one moment in the 20th century that locked the whole system into place. May 15th, 1972. Wisconsin versus Yoder. 3 Amish fathers in Greene County, Wisconsin, were arrested for refusing to send their kids to high school. Wisconsin law required attendance until age 16. The Amish stopped formal schooling at the 8th grade and put their teenagers into vocational training inside the community. Jonas Yoder, Wallace Miller, and Adin Yutzi each got fined $5. That $5 fine went all the way to the Supreme Court. What happened in that courtroom is the part nobody remembers. The court did not just rule that the Amish had a First Amendment right to skip high school. They ruled that the Amish community was, in the court's own words, a highly successful social unit within our society. The justices noted that Amish people did not commit crimes, did not collect welfare, did not have unemployment, and did not impose any costs on the rest of the country. The court basically said, "This system works, leave it alone." That ruling did something almost no other religious group in American history has ever gotten. It legally insulated the entire Amish way of life from state interference. Compulsory schooling, Social Security, which Congress had already exempted them from back in 1965, the Affordable Care Act, decades later. One by one, the Amish were carved out of the obligations that the rest of America carries. The state, after 400 years of trying to crush them, drown them, burn them, and assimilate them, had finally given up and signed a treaty. The 500-year system was now legally protected. Everything that came next was just the math doing its work. To understand why the Amish keep winning, you have to look at what happens when something goes wrong in an Amish community. A barn burns down. 300 men show up the next week at 6 in the morning. They rebuild it before sunset. There is no contract, no invoice, no insurance company. The family who lost the barn does not pay a dime in money. They are expected to show up the next time someone else's barn burns. A child is born with a serious genetic condition. The Amish have higher rates of certain conditions because of their small founding population, which is why specialty clinics like the New Leaf Center in Holmes County, Ohio, exist. The local church takes up a collection. If the bill is too big for one church, neighboring churches send funds. Many communities now have formalized hospital aid plans, where members pay around $100 a month and the fund covers major medical costs. They negotiate directly with hospitals and clinics, and they pay in cash within 10 days. That alone gets them better prices than most insurance companies can get. A father breaks his leg in the middle of harvest. His neighbors bring in his crops without asking. A young couple gets married. Their relatives show up to paint the house. An elderly widow loses her husband. The deacon visits her every week. The church sends meals, and a member of her extended family quietly moves in. The Amish do not have Social Security. Congress passed their religious exemption in 1965 specifically because their communities already took care of their elderly. They do not have Medicare. They are exempt from the Affordable Care Act. They have no 401ks, no IRAs, no health insurance in the normal sense, and yet they live longer than the American average. Holmes County, Ohio, where roughly half the population is Amish, is one of the healthiest counties in the entire state. The reason is the same reason their ancestors survived being drowned in Swiss rivers. The community is the insurance policy. The community is the retirement plan. The community is the safety net. So why doesn't anyone copy this? Because the cost is brutal. The 8th grade education ceiling is not negotiable in most Amish communities. If you want to be a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, a scientist, you cannot do it and stay Amish. You will leave, and if you leave after being baptized, you will be shunned. Your parents will not eat with you. Your siblings will not visit you. The community that raised you will treat you as if you had died. The technological restrictions are not optional either. In most communities, there are no personal cars, though hired cars are permitted in some. There is no grid electricity in your home, no social media, no smartphones outside of limited business use, no Netflix, no TikTok, no air conditioning in much of the housing, none of the entertainment, comfort, and convenience that the rest of America considers basic human existence. The gender roles are strict. The dress code is strict. The decision-making is communal, which means your individual preferences will be overruled by the Ordnung. You will marry inside the community. You will work inside the community. You will be buried inside the community. This is the part of the story that the Hallmark movies and the Amish romance novels do not show you. The 500-year survival system is built on a trade-off that most modern Americans would never make. Personal freedom in exchange for collective continuity, individual ambition in exchange for guaranteed belonging, the thrill of choice in exchange for the comfort of a settled life. You can have what the Amish have. You just have to give up almost everything that you currently call freedom to get it. And almost nobody is willing to pay that price, which is exactly why the system continues to work. This is the part that everyone misses. The horse and buggy thing is not the system. The plain clothing, the straw hats, the bonnets, the German prayer books, none of that is the system. Those are just the visible firewall, the social uniform that signals to every member, every day, that they belong to something separate from the world outside. The actual system is the network. It is the 300 men at the barn raising. It is the deacon visiting the sick widow. It is the hospital aid fund. It is the relatives who will literally move into your house when you have a baby. It is the fact that no Amish person dies alone. No Amish family goes bankrupt over a medical bill. No Amish child grows up without dozens of adults who know their name. They did not outlast the Puritans because they had better theology. They outlasted them because they kept the parish dense, the families large, and the network unbreakable. The Shakers built beautiful furniture and wrote beautiful music. But the Shakers were also celibate. The Amish were not. Only one of those systems compounded. The British Empire, Standard Oil, the Steel Barons. Every one of those empires was built on individuals competing in markets. The Amish were built on hundreds of people who could not imagine their lives apart from the rest of the church. The market eats individuals. The market cannot eat a parish. What outlasted every American empire was not religion. It was a network that refused to let any of its members stand alone. The Amish do not see themselves as winners. They would be uncomfortable with this entire framing. They are not running a 500-year experiment in demographic success. They are not trying to outlast anyone. They are just doing what their great-great-great-great-grandparents did in a Swiss valley, with the same prayers, the same calyces, the same quiet evening hymns. But the math is the math. The empires that mocked them are gone. The movements that competed with them are gone. The technological revolutions that were supposed to replace them have come and gone 3 times over. And the Amish are still here, growing, doubling, spilling into new states, raising new barns, burying their dead in tight rows of identical headstones in fields that have not changed in 100 years. 500 years. And counting. As always, we'll see you in the past.